Asterisk Joe Rogan didn't storm out often. In fact, he usually prided himself on staying in the ring, no matter how chaotic a conversation became. That was part of the brand. Sit down, talk it out, let the weirdness unfold. But as he stepped out of the studio, jaw tight and hands curled into fists, even he knew this wasn't ordinary friction. Asterisk Prince Harry, left alone in the chair, leaned back like he'd just won something. He crossed his arms, legs stretching out in front of him like he finally had room to breathe. The dim studio lights glinted off the edge of his watch, turning the entire setup into a strange, quiet stage where he now sat center spotlight. Asterisk behind the glass. The producers exchanged stunned, confused looks. No one moved. No one wanted to breathe too loudly in case it triggered the next explosion. Asterisk. Harry's smirk lingered as he reached for the water bottle on the table. Asterisk. Thought he'd last longer, he muttered to himself. The audio was still rolling. The cameras were still rolling. Asterisk Harry. He clearly didn't care. Asterisk the producer. Evan, a guy who'd worked over 1,000 episodes without ever pressing the emergency mute button, hovered his hand over it now. He glanced toward the hall where Joe had disappeared. Asterisk, he's pissed, Evan whispered. Asterisk, yeah, another producer murmured. But, like, actually pissed. Not show pissed. Asterisk, they weren't wrong. Joe wasn't someone who cracked often, but something about the way Harry had spoken to him, the arrogance, the entitlement tit had hit a nerve somewhere deeper than usual. Asterisk still on mic. Harry sighed loudly, theatrically, and sank further into his seat. Asterisk Americans, he muttered. So sensitive. Evan slapped the mute button. That, at least, couldn't go out live, but the cameras kept rolling. After almost a full minute of tense silence, Joe reappeared in the doorway. He looked calmer, but only in the way a fighter looks calm right before the bell signals the next round. He stepped back inside, closed the door gently behind him, and took his seat with a slowness that felt deliberate. Asterisk all right, he said, voice even but edged. Let's finish this. Harry didn't flinch. Good. I was beginning to think you'd abandoned your own show. Joe ignored the bait. I took a breather because this isn't going anywhere productive. So we're going to reset. Asterisk reset, Harry repeated, sounding amused. Is that what you call regrouping? Joe breathed through his nose. We're going to talk like adults. No ego. No insults. Deal. Harry smirked faintly. I haven't insulted anyone. I've only spoken the truth. If people feel insulted, that's their insecurity. Joe stared at him for a long second before shaking his head. See, man? That right there. That's the problem. Harry tilted his head. What? Honesty. Asterisk no, Joe said flatly. Your inability to see when you're being condescending as hell? Harry blinked, surprised. I'm a prince. Joe, condescension is practically expected. Asterisk Joe actually let out a short laugh more. Disbelief, then humor. Asterisk, at least you said something. Honest Harry's lips twitched. Thank you, asterisk, that wasn't a compliment. Asterisk. The air simmered again. But this time Joe pressed forward before Harry could respond. Asterisk, let's talk plainly, Joe said. Why did you really come here? Because I don't buy that you came for honesty or truth or whatever PR phrase you used. Why this show? Why me? Asterisk, Harry's fingers tapped the armrest, subtle annoyance showing through dot. Asterisk, I chose this platform because you have reach, influence, a global audience. People who listen, people you called peasants, Joe reminded him. Harry's nostrils flared. Asterisk, I was provoked. Asterisk, no, Joe said calmly. You were challenged. You don't like being challenged? Harry leaned forward sharply. I've been challenged my entire life. Asterisk, no, Joe repeated. You've been managed your entire life. Those aren't the same thing. Ari's eyes darkened. You think you know more about my life than I do? Asterisk, I think you've lived in a bubble so long you don't recognize when someone isn't impressed. Asterisk Harry blinked, And for just a moment, something unguarded flickered across his expression. Something like hurt. But it hardened again almost instantly. "Asterisk, you Americans," he said slowly. "You pretend you don't care about status. But the moment you're in the room with someone born into it, you get defensive." Joe folded his arms. "Harry, I've interviewed astronauts, presidents, scientists, billionaires, fighters, people who've done more than inherit a title. You being a prince doesn't make me defensive. It makes you defensive." "Asterisk, that's absurd." "Asterisk, is it?" Joe asked. "Because every time I ask a real question, you act like I committed treason." Harry opened his mouth to fire back, but Joe held up a hand. "Let's strip everything away," Joe said. "No royalty. No titles. No press. Just you. Right now. Sitting in that chair. Do you like who you are?" Harry froze. Not visibly. Not dramatically. But something in his posture went rigid, like a soldier reacting instinctively to a command they weren't expecting. Asterisk, Joe didn't blink. Harry swallowed. "Of course," he said. "I've worked hard to become who I am." "Asterisk, who is that?" Joe asked softly. "Asterisk, a free man." "Asterisk, are you?" Heat crept into Harry's face. "Yes." Asterisk, "Then why come to a podcast the size of this one to convince everyone you're free?" Joe asked. "Free people don't explain their freedom. They live it." Asterisk behind the glass. Someone whispered, "Damn." Harry's hands curled into fists. "You don't understand the scrutiny I've lived under." Joe nodded. "You're right. I don't. But you know what else I don't understand? Why you think it's everyone else's job to fix what you haven't dealt with?" Harry's jaw clenched hard enough to show a vein near his temple. "I'm not here to be analyzed," he said. "I'm here to tell my story." Asterisk, then tell it, Joe said. "Instead of tearing down everyone who asks you a question." Harry leaned forward, voice low and sharp. "You're twisting my words." Asterisk, no, Joe said. "I'm pointing out your patterns," Harry scoffed. "Patterns." Asterisk, yeah, Joe said. "Like blaming, deflecting, insulting, acting like criticism is persecution." Harry shook his head in disbelief. "You're unbelievable." Asterisk, Harry, Joe said. "Look at yourself right now. You're in a studio in Texas calling millions of people peasants and expecting applause." Harry's eyes narrowed. "Maybe Texans should learn not to take everything personally." Asterisk, Joe laughed once. "Incredulous." Asterisk, "You really think you're above them, don't you?" Asterisk, Harry didn't answer. "Not directly." Asterisk, "I think I've lived a life you can understand." Asterisk, true, Joe said. "But living an unusual life doesn't make you superior. It just makes you unusual." Harry didn't like that answer. "Are we done?" he demanded. Asterisk, not yet, Joe said. "There's one thing I still want to know." Harry exhaled through his nose. "What now?" Joe leaned forward. "When you walk out of here, when the cameras are off, when it's just you, do you ever miss your brother?" Harry's face changed. For the first time, the veneer cracked. Not dramatically, not theatrically. But something lost flickered across his features, an ache buried under years of anger, pride, and rehearsed speeches. His eyes dipped barely. Like the question struck somewhere he didn't expect. "I'd only started. Don't give me the PR answer," Joe said softly. "Just answer like a human being." Harry's throat bobbed. "I don't know," he finally whispered. Joe nodded gently. "That's the most honest thing you've said today." Asterisk, Harry looked away, the corner of his jaw trembling slightly before he forced it back into stillness. Asterisk, Joe let the silence hang, respecting it. For once, neither man spoke. Then Joe leaned back. "All right," he said. "I think we're done here." Asterisk, Harry nodded once. Curtly, asterisk, fine. Joe stood and removed his headphones. "Cut it," told the control room. The red recording lights dimmed. Harry stayed seated for a moment, staring at the table. The arrogance on his face had evaporated, leaving something raw, something unguarded, something almost painfully human. A man who'd spent years fighting ghosts and institutions and headlines, yet couldn't escape the simplest truth. He wasn't sure who he was without the war. Joe waited by the door. Asterisk Harry finally stood, straightened his sweater, and walked toward him. Asterisk for a moment. Joe thought he might say something an apology, a thank you, a truth he wasn't brave enough to say on air. Asterisk instead, Harry simply nodded, the smallest gesture of acknowledgement. Asterisk Joe nodded back. They parted ways without another word. And somewhere behind the glass, the producers exhaled for the first time in an hour.